Alright, in this video we're going to walk through the installation steps for the Vagabond Motorsports Fender Eliminator on the 2025 Yamaha MT-07.
Let's quickly review some of the key details for the Vagabond Motorsports Fender Eliminator kit for the 2025 model MT-07. And for 2025 in particular, the newer generation MT-07, we have updated our parts specifically on the custom metal components, right? So there is the subframe mount or the frame mount portion that bolts up and trims out the big gaps between the factory, like the right and left side panels. And then there's the lower mount that carries your lights and your license plate mount. Both of these components are CNC laser cut and CNC formed from 1/8 inch thick aluminum sheet, powder coated in UV resistant satin black powder coat, so a very durable OEM grade finish. Both proudly made here in the United States off of CAD models and laser scans of the motorcycle, so it should be the kind of the best fitting kit out there. It totally plug and play so that it reuses your OEM, your DOT certified lights for both your turn signals and your license plate light. It's a simple hand tool, no permanent modification installation process. We include a pretty comprehensive set of kind of hardware with the kit, including a pair of zip ties, a pair of plastic washers to trim out the underside plastics, rubber grommet to install into the Fender Eliminator to secure the wiring, a pair of rubber bumpers for the license plate flange to minimize license plate buzzing and cracking, turn signal spacers, so custom laser cut plastic spacers that are going to thicken up these flanges so that the license or the turn signals are relatively tight in their holes, and then a set of stainless steel hardware M5 socketed cap screws and lock washers to connect these two pieces. So when installed on the motorcycle, these two pieces bolt together, and so that hardware is included. A couple design points on this Fender Eliminator that are unique to the Vagabond part. You can see right above the license plate light, there's that extension out of our subframe mount that kind of cleanly closes out the gap left between the two side panels. And then underneath, you can see our subframe mount extends forward and has that bend right in line with the factory plastics, and that closes out a pretty big gap left by the factory fender as well. And so the installed Fender Eliminator from Vagabond is going to be very kind of OEM grade in appearance. As for tools you'll need for this installation, you'll need a Phillips head screwdriver, a 4mm Allen key, either in an L key like that or a socket or a bit. You need an 8 and a 12mm hex socket, a pair of flush cutters or dikes, and either a ratchet or a power driver. We're going to start the process with some disassembly. Using the key in the left side of the bike, you can remove the passenger seat. Take the toolkit out of here. We're going to release these two plastic pop rivets. Use a tool like a screwdriver or a pick to push the center down until they click. Slide that panel out. Next, there's two 4mm head Allen bolts. Take the bolts and then lift the seat out and away. Also going to remove these two Phillips head screws to take this center trim panel out. You can see it's got little tabs, you can just pick it up and slide it rearward. Next, we're going to pull the side panels off the motorcycle, and we're going to start with these 4mm Allen head bolts. So grab your 4mm hex key, and there's 6 total bolts. So there's 2 at the front, 2 on this crossbar, and then 2 more on these metal brackets. Next, you're going to remove these 2 12mm hex head bolts. So grab your socket, and careful, there are spacers under here that are in between the bolt and the subframe, so don't lose those. And lastly, up on the top, you're going to remove these 2 plastic push rivets connecting 2 pieces of the plastics. And on the underside of the motorcycle, you're going to remove these 4 plastic push rivets. And this will come off, this little trim piece of plastic will come off at that point. So once you've got all the bolts and all the rivets out, you're going to take these plastics out, and the main thing is that you kind of have to take this plastic part and like pry it open from both the top. You can see there's little pins you got to lift, and then also off the bottom there's a tab on the light, and then you kind of rotate it out. So you can't just yank them off, you kind of have to stick a fingernail in there. There we go. Next we're going to work on the electrical connector. So there's the black and white 2-pin that are, there's a tab on them that you kind of have to squeeze them to hear a pop. Maybe a small click, and then you can release them. And then there's also this gray 2-pin that's much easier, just to stick a fingernail under that tab, pry it up. Remove that one. You don't have to disconnect this 3-pin for the tail light, but if it's in the way, you can. Again, this was one of those, like, hear that click, and then you can pull it off. Last bit up here is there's a zip tie connecting this whole bundle, and just carefully you're going to want to take your dikes or your flush cutters and cut that zip tie. Next we can take the whole OEM fender assembly off, and there's 4 bolts. They're 8mm hex head bolts. I've already removed the 2 on this side, and then once you remove those, just hold on their last bolt, hold it with a free hand and help guide the cabling out, and you are going to reuse those 4 bolts, so set them aside. Once the fender's off the bike, we're going to break it down and take the lights out of it for the Fender Eliminator. Start by removing the license plate, and we'll reuse whatever hardware was supplied from the factory. In this case it's Phillips head bolts and nuts. Next we're going to remove these 4 4mm head Allen bolts, and a word of caution here is that these ones have been loosened already. They're going to be really tight, and they do have thread locker on them, and so don't use a ball end or a really worn out Allen key on that, because they are pretty easy to strip out otherwise. We're not going to reuse any of these fasteners, but if you want to put the fender back together, you can see it kind of just falls apart when those 4 bolts come out of it. You can set all that to the side. Next we're going to pull the lights out of the factory fender. Yamahas have a little plastic, like a little locking plate. You lift the tabs to release that, and then you can just grab the whole light and kind of yank it out, starting by kind of grab it by the lights, like the lens side, and pull backwards. Pull the whole thing out. We'll do it to the other side as well. After the turn signals are out, it's just the license plate light, and that's a pair of Phillips head screws. And for this light, we are going to remove and reuse all the factory mounting hardware. And that entails the 2 screws, these 2 kind of bushings, metal bushings, and the 2 grommets for the license plate light. So for the turn signals, you can, if you want, leave this very flexible. It's like essentially an extension, like a rubber boot. My recommendation would be to remove that, and so you can just kind of grasp that whole boot and pull it off, just because it makes the signals droopier than they need to be, and then remove this kind of white plastic insert from it, and that's going to slip off. Do that to both signals. you've got those extensions off, we're ready for Fender Eliminator assembly. Next we're going to start assembly onto the Fender Eliminator body. We'll start with the license plate light, which is going to kind of mimic the factory setup, in which case install those two kind of rubber split grommets. You can just jam them in the hole. Flip to the back side and kind of help clean it up so that they sit nicely. And you can install from kind of the outward side these two metal bushings, and then the license plate light will go through, and we'll reuse the factory hardware. Grab a Phillips head screw driver and tighten these, and they should, I mean, there's no need in crazy over tightening these, but you will feel it's not like it's squishing that bushing. It actually is going, there's still a tiny bit of give in there, but it is bottoming out the whole assembly, and so you will feel that screw tighten up. Next we're going to put the turn signals in, and with the kit you get a pair of these laser cut plastic spacers that are just going to thicken up the gap, because the slot in the factory, or the flange in the factory plastics, is a little thicker than the metal in the Fender Eliminator. They come with that release paper, or protective kind of paper on them. Just peel that paper off before installation, and one by one you'll thread that spacer on. And I mean, they're thin plastic, so you can actually snap them, but they're pretty easy to install, which is to say there's on the turn signal, there's this split side. That's the real, call it like very squishy side. So start on the narrow end, like of the teardrop, seat the spacer, and then you can kind of just cram the easy side through. So it's pretty simple, but it's worth a little bit of caution so you don't crack the spacers. If you do, just let us know and we'll ship you out some new ones, but they're not that delicate. Okay. Once you got those spacers on, we can actually just install the turn signals into the Fender Eliminator, and the turn signal with the white connector is the right side, and so thread it through the teardrop shaped hole, then up the central hole in this piece of the Fender Eliminator. Then just kind of like that spacer, start on the narrow end of the kind of teardrop shaped hole, seat the turn signal, and then push the rest through. This one's caught a tiny bit. There we go. And you should kind of hear that click. Oh, not quite. You should see it sit nice and flush. And then, where is that? Oh, here it is. Then you're going to take that like kind of black plastic insert, slide it on up, and get the rubber portion over those two tabs. There you go. The little rubber ears need to clip over. Alright, you can pull the cable through. Do it on this side as well. Excellent. Alright, and then the last cable to go through will be your license plate light cable. And this one, depending on how stiff that strain relief is for that boot, you're going to kind of want to bend it at 90 degrees to go right up through that central hole. So we're nearly done with kind of building up this lower portion of the fender eliminator, but arguably the hardest part we have to do now, which is we supply this rubber grommet with the kit. It fits very nicely into that top hole and squeezes the cables to give you nice strain relief on that, but it is a bit of a stretch over these big turn signal connectors, and you can either try to just like stretch it over. I find it's a lot easier to kind of roll it over itself, which is to say kind of like cram a part of it in and then let the grommet kind of go inside out. Not going to hurt the grommet. And start with the two turn signal connectors. That's by far the hardest. Once you get it over those two, let the grommet kind of return to its normal shape. Slide it on down. The license plate light connector is super easy in comparison. And then as you slide that down, before you get it to the very bottom, it's worthwhile to kind of sort out how you want your cables. Just to say, kind of line them up in the order that right now I've got essentially it's that left turn signal, license plate light, right turn signal. Kind of guide that down, grommet down, and then once you get to the top, you actually just seat it in the hole by starting an edge and kind of working your way around, pushing it into this channel. So you flip it over, you'll see nice and tidy wire pass through into the grommet. It's actually held pretty securely, so these don't actually need like another zip tie on the bottom. And really the only thing to note is that you can get kind of clear access to these 4 bolt holes because you're going to essentially install the 2 pieces of the fender eliminator at the end. Before we install this on the motorcycle, go ahead and insert the 2 rubber bumpers supplied with the kit into the license plate flange of the fender eliminator. That's just going to keep the license plate from buzzing or rattling, worst case cracking, over the life of your bike. Next we're going to install the subframe mount for the fender eliminator. So that's that smaller of the 2 components included in the kit. We're going to reuse the 8mm hex head bolts, factory bolts, and note that the tail light's going to float at this point because the side panels are going to actually lift it up. And if you're using a power driver, just make sure you throw a wrench on them at the end to make sure they're good and snug. Next you're going to take the assembled fender eliminator and start by guiding the 3 electrical connectors forward and up, and you'll see that grommet is going to essentially mount into that circular hole in the frame mount. Then you're going to take the 4 M5, so there's a 4mm socket head cap screw, so you take your 4mm hex head key, and those are going to go into the 4 threaded inserts on the fender eliminator. So once they're all hand tight, go around in kind of a square pattern and snug them all up. Now we reconnect all the electrical connectors. And you'll notice you got a fair bit of extra because of how much shorter the wiring runs are with the fender eliminator. So once you've got them connected, we provide another zip tie to reseat or grab that whole bundle, including the tail light. So there's a little kind of bridge of plastic here that we're going to go under, just like the factory zip tie did. Then once you have this kind of U of zip tie, make sure you've got all 4 of your electrical looms. So the 3 from the Fender Eliminator and the tail light. Snug that up. And then trim it with a pair of flush cutters. So with all this extra wiring loom, our recommendation is to kind of tuck it into a kind of larger service loop, and then take the second supplied zip tie, and this one's not, I wouldn't necessarily tie it to anything under here, but turn that into a nice little loop. You don't have to go super tight on that one. And then again, trim it flush. Next we're going to reinstall the side panels. Kind of get them started in the front under that front piece of plastic, and then kind of guide them in both on the top and the bottom because they want to catch. You'll lift the tail light to get it registered correctly. There we go. The other side as well. Now we're going to slowly just put back all the fasteners we removed while disassembling. So the 2 plastic push rivets, these 12mm hex head bolts with their metal spacers, and the 4mm Allen key bolts, with the only note is that the ones that are the flathead go into the metal crossbar. Just keep going with the reassembly. There's that top panel, little trim panel between the side panels with its 2 Phillips head screws. There's the rider seat with its 4mm the trim panel between the 2 seats. Kind of goes under the seat and slides forward. Factory tool set and the passenger seat. And on the underside of the motorcycle, you're going to reinstall the 4 plastic push rivets, and with one small change. The 2 smaller, kind of glossier ones go in without any modification. We supply 2 kind of thicker black plastic washers that trim out the rear ones, because there's that extra piece of plastic there, that kind of thinned bit on the factory fender, and so that just takes up that space, so everything still fits really nicely. At this point, the installation of the Fender Eliminator is complete. We recommend you do a quick systems check just to make sure your license plate light, your turn signals, and your hazards all work properly. Double check your brake lights continue to work, and that's it. Now with that, the installation process for the Vagabond Motorsports Fender Eliminator on the 2025 Yamaha MT-07 is complete. Our products can be found at www.vagabondmotorsports.com. Thank you for watching.